Good morning, everybody. Today, we are going to be chatting about the Supra Lockbox Exchange that's going to be taking place next week. So, it has been many years since we have had a Lockbox Exchange. We are very fortunate that in the Roanoke Valley Association of Realtors, they always work very hard to make sure that we are able to upgrade our lockboxes at no additional expense to us, the agents. So this one will be the same. It's going to be a what they call one-for-one exchange. So if you have a lockbox, you may exchange it for no additional expense for the new upgraded lockbox. There are going to be some new bells and whistles on the new lockboxes, which I'm very excited about. Now, we're staying with the same company, which is Supra, and all the iPhone users will be excited to hear that with the upgrade next week, you will no longer need a fob for your iPhone. So, yay, yay. Now, additionally, another feature is going to be enabled on this new box called the one-day showing code. So if you have to let a home inspector back in as the listing agent will retain all control over the lockbox and all access over the lockbox for non-realtors and non-RVAR members. If the listing agent would like to give a one-day code to, say, a home inspector who needs to pick up a radon test, then they are able to issue a one-day code, and they can even indicate how many hours in that day, like from 1 p.m. to 2 p.m. They can be very specific about when access is allowed. The only thing the recipient of the one-day code will need is the Supra app. So they're going to have to put the Supra app on their phone. It's similar, it's the same app as the one we have on our phone currently. And they're going to use that to access the one-day code and access the box. They will open it the same way we open ours. However, since they are not a member of the Roanoke Valley Association of Realtors, obviously a lot of their controls that they have available to them on the app will be restricted to just accessing that one-day code. The reason why the board of directors chose to stay with Supra instead of going with another vendor is they did actually look at several vendors, and security was very important to the board of directors, and they wanted to make sure that we were able to really keep control of those one-day codes. And a competing vendor, which I use in New River Valley, which is called Central Lock, has the same feature. However, the recipient of the code does not need to be registered in any way on the app or anywhere else. So it just generates a one-day code, and there's a keypad on the front of the Central Lock. And so anyone could use that code, anyone could share that code, and anyone could access it with there not being any sort of identifying stamp on that lockbox as to whose phone accessed the lockbox. So they decided to go with Supra. Supra, at this point, yes, you can give the one-day code to anybody, but you better have your seller's permission. And whoever you're giving that one-day code to, they at least will be registered with a serial number on their phone. They'll be registered to that Supra app that they've had to download to their phone and register themselves with. So there'll at least be some sort of tracing mechanism in place if something goes wrong with the one-day code. The Lockbox Exchange is beginning on August 3rd. Let me get my notes out here. So it will be from August 3rd through August 5th from 10 a.m. to 7 p.m. at the Holiday Inn Tanglewood in the Grand Ballroom, and then curbside service as well. So I'm going to actually toot coronavirus's horn here for a minute, and it has allowed us to have curbside service. So I'm not so sure that would have existed any other year. So now they can accommodate you at your car as you pull up, and they will whisk away your old lock boxes and whisk back to you brand new ones. So good work there, El Presidente, manning this this project and making sure we had something as awesome as curbside service. Now, if you're like me and you own 20 plus lock boxes, they will not be giving you curbside service. So Donna is frantically tracking. How many?
41.
41 lock boxes. Yep. So Donna is frantically trying to track down all of my lock boxes. And Donna, how many do you currently have?
Well, 1, 2, 3, 4, 7 of yours, Taylor's 4, and then about 12 that have came along that I don't even know if they're registered, and then a lot that I can't find. So,
Okay.
if anybody has any of the lock boxes, please let me know. That would be great. That way I'll know I can check it off and get it back.
Thank you, Donna. So if you have more than 20 lock boxes, they are arranging for you to have a special time to come in and have sort of a private exchange so that they can exchange you out. They've been incredibly accommodating, and they're also going to be doing the exchange at the lake as well, because we never want to forget about our lake populace. So on the 6th from 10 a.m. to 7 p.m., they'll be at Westlake Golf and Country Club. And that is going to be curbside only. So no going inside the building. So, but however, you know, the agent's using the Lake Lockbox Exchange. There are just fewer of them. So they should be able to manage that just fine. Now, you have to, if you're going to go to the Westlake Golf Country Club to do your exchange, you are going to have to make an appointment. So it's not just curbside whenever you want to come. They're asking you to make an appointment and then show up at your allotted time. So what do you need to do? Oh, there's also a link on you should have received an email this week explaining all of this, and there is a link to schedule your time. So instead of just wandering over to the Holiday Inn whenever you want to, click that button, make your appointment. It's going to make you wait less amount of time. They're going to be ready for you when you get there. And it's just going to make everything go smoother. So please click the link in that email. You should have gotten it. Looks like this. And there are several links in there so that you can go on and go ahead and make your scheduled appointment. Now, if you were on vacation this week or you're not able to get there this week, they are going to be doing exchanges at the RVAR office for the weeks following the Lockbox Exchange next week. So it's not going to be this week and that's it. So what that brings up to mind is that we're going to see a lot of wonky access for the next month. So for the next month, maybe there's a lockbox. Maybe there isn't a lockbox. Maybe there's a contractor or keypad lockbox. Maybe there's a key under a rock. Let's hope not, you know, because we still have to be assuring our sellers that we are doing secure access to their home that is supervised. So I don't love contractor lockboxes. You don't know who's been in it. You don't know who's given the key to whom, okay? But I also understand that there's going to be a period of time where you're having to pull all your lockboxes off of the properties and bring them in to exchange them and get the other lock boxes back. So it's going to be a little wild for the next probably 3 weeks while people do that. So what I would recommend is before you go out to show houses, just text the listing agent and say, hey, just wanted to make sure there's a lockbox on the property. And keep your fob on you, if you still have an iPhone, for the next month, because you may bump into lockboxes that have not been exchanged yet. Okay. And you would hate to be like, woo, fob free, and then you can't get into the house. So just continue to carry that fob a little while longer and keep that fob on you in case you run into any lock boxes that have not been exchanged yet. Make sense? Great. So once you have exchanged your lock boxes, I would recommend you take a little time to set all of your shackle codes, reset all those shackle codes and make them what you want them to be, okay? There was a period of years where our shackle codes were just anything and everything. We eventually just did the maintenance of sitting down and making all of the shackle codes on my lock boxes one code. That way I know if it's out in the field somewhere and someone is having trouble with it and I need to give them the shackle code for whatever reason, perhaps to reset the hours because it's set to some sort of funky hours, or I need to give it to my dad who's going to go out and, you know, take it off the door. I know what that shackle code's going to be because I've made them all be the same. Okay. If you ever borrow a lockbox from the office. That's perfectly fine, but you are going to have to register it to your Supra account in order to get those updates as to who's been in the home and seen the home, okay? It doesn't know it's you. If you borrow a lockbox, it has no idea that Samantha borrowed the lockbox and Samantha should be getting the showing results, okay? So you're gonna have to go onto your Supra app or your Supra or the Supra site. And if you go to RVAR, excuse me, if you go to the MLS on the dashboard, you're going to see a list of blue hyperlinks to things. There's links to the municipality GIS records. There's a link to a PDF of the tax rates. There's also a link to Supra. So if you click that link and go to Supra, you can log in and you should be able to see your full inventory of lockboxes. And if you go back to that email that RVAR sent you this week, there's also going to be a link in there. And you can log into Supra and print out an inventory of everything you should have. I just gave that to Donna this week, and it's a long list. And who knows where some of those are. And I'm sure some will show up later, 6 months from now, a year from now, 3 years from now, who knows? They'll show back up. Unfortunately, there will be a time period when RVAR is no longer exchanging them one for one, and those just become obsolete. We do occasionally have agents stop by years after they went inactive and say, hey, I found a lockbox in the garage. Can you guys use it? And, you know, it depends. For many years after our last exchange, it was, you know, we could still exchange it for the new one, but then at some point it just was no longer exchangeable. So if you can, dig through the garage, dig through the, you know, the shed and find them all now if you can. So we only do this every, you know, 5 years or so or more. So it shouldn't be too often that you're having to dig through the shed and the garage, but use this as an opportunity to organize your garage. All right, who has questions about the Lockbox Exchange? If you can or can't go. We had an agent in here yesterday saying, hey, anybody have any lockboxes to sell? And we all were saying, nope, because they're going to be brand new ones next week. So any questions?
Hey, I got some stuff just to follow up on what you were saying.
Please, please.
So yes, the fobs will definitely be necessary for at least 30 days.
Mm-hmm.
And as far as the 1-day code,
Mm-hmm.
the main security reason was that the phone that receives the code needs to be present to open the lockbox.
Correct.
The code is not transferable in any way, any shape or form. And also to use curbside, I believe it is 5 lockboxes or less.
Ah, unless it's Westlake, because I think they're only doing curbside.
Yes, but at the Tanglewood location, I believe it is 5 or less lockboxes.
Okay.
Yep.
Also, to add on to Walter's information, just so that you're aware when you go to the Lockbox Exchange, they will be doing exchanges in different meeting rooms. Masks are going to be required, and they are going to be doing temperature checks on your forehead when you come in. That is not RVAR, that is Supra. Supra has its own COVID-19 protocol that they are requiring everybody follow and their employees follow. There will be cleaning and sanitization of each room frequently throughout the day. And they will be asking you, have you or anyone you live with or have been in close contact with, 1, traveled internationally and or on a cruise ship within the last 14 days, or 2, been diagnosed with COVID-19. So they will be asking you that just to prepare yourselves and know that those are questions you're going to have to answer, and that you are going to have your temperature checked. So just letting you know ahead of time that that'll be happening, okay? Let's see, what am I forgetting about the Lockbox Exchange? Obviously, if you can't make it to the exchange this week, you will need to make an appointment at RVAR, and they are doing that exchange August 10th through 14th between 9 a.m. and 6 p.m., but you'll need to make an appointment. Okay. we are going to move on. Let me get rid of that. Bear with me one moment. Anyone have any new business while I'm getting ready for the next section? Okay. All right. So the next thing I want to chat about is our current market. So I had a low appraisal come in yesterday. It is ruining my transaction, as it has done to you in the past, I'm sure. I had about a 30-minute conversation with the appraiser yesterday, and he was very nice, and I was very nice. It did not change that the appraisal is low. So something I want to share with you is when we are in a market like now, which we would call a seller's market, there is not enough inventory. There are not enough choices for buyers. So sellers are able to demand higher money and fewer contingencies and fewer concessions than in any other market. We run the risk of low appraisals. So another agent was negotiating a transaction last night. They were paying full price and they were adding their closing costs on top of that. That is going to be a risk that the appraisal may come in low. So it is something for sellers to consider right now. Buyers always seem to need help with closing cost money. They want to finance those closing costs into their mortgage. That has not changed. They just don't have $10,000 to use towards closing costs once they're paying their down payment. So in this market, appraisals become even more risky when you're adding closing costs on top of offering full price. Now, in my case, we were doing a sale where the appraisal is perfectly fine. It came in fine for our actual purchase price, but these folks are doing a renovation loan with the purchase. So even though we sold the house for $250,000, the appraiser was coming in with the quote from the contractor as to what all was going to be done in the home. And in this case, they were taking down a deck, building a large expanded deck. They were expanding the kitchen into a side room, taking out the wall between the two and leveling the floors, and then replacing the entire kitchen with a brand new expanded huge kitchen. And they were putting AC in the entire house. Well, because of that, the appraiser went in and his job was to decide what the value of the home would be once all those renovations were completed. Now, that means what we needed was a value of $315,000. So we sold it for $250,000, and we were hoping that the appraisal would say, with all of those upgrades and all of those improvements, this house would be worth $315,000. Well, unfortunately, the appraisal came back at $270,000. So at face value, we got very frustrated, me and the buyer's agent, that he felt that all of those upgrades would result in only a $20,000 value, okay? However, when he explained it, what he was saying was, he can't give you dollar for dollar that renovation money. Whether I agree with that method of thinking or not, it's not for me to say because I'm not the appraiser. But I think all of us would say that if we're looking at a house that is dated and we spend $5,000 in each bathroom and maybe $10,000 just updating the kitchen, I think we would get all of that money back in this type of market. Well, he was asserting that he could only give me 50 cents on the dollar for all of the renovation cost. So unfortunately, we're going to have to be nimble enough to try to switch either to another type of loan product or possibly go ahead and close and do a renovation loan afterwards. It's very frustrating to the sellers and the buyers. The buyers still very much want this house. They still very much want to be able to finance the renovations on this home that they think the home needs before they move in. It was a frustrating experience, but it just calls to mind again that we are absolutely at the whim of that appraiser. So once you sell the house, you then have to hold your breath until the appraisal comes in. especially in this type of market where sellers are getting at or above list price, and then we're tacking closing costs on top of that. And in defense of appraisers, I can understand his position when he says to me, if you're putting, and we didn't in our case, but if we're putting $7,000 on top of the list price to pay for closing costs, why are we expecting that appraiser to find an extra $7,000 of value in that house? And what he said to me yesterday is, if I were a seller, I'd be irritated with my listing agent, because that would prove that the house was worth $7,000 more. And why didn't we list it for that or accept that? It's a good point. We're expecting appraisers to just stretch and include those closing costs when that may be a luxury that buyers don't get to have right now. So when it swings back to a buyer's market and we've got way too many houses and not enough buyers, then buyers get to dictate what happens. And buyers get to say, yeah, I'm not giving you full list price. I'm going to take $10,000 off your list price, and I'm going to ask for $7,000 in closing costs. Well, that's a much easier market for appraisers to conduct appraisals that come in at or above purchase price. But right now, they're going to be growing pains, and they're going to be low appraisals. Not necessarily because we overvalued the property, but it could be because we've added those closing costs on top. Now, a big help is that we have now added to our standard form, the exclusive right to represent seller form. We've now added on that field, allowing the seller to agree to detail seller paid concessions at closing when we record that closing on the MLS, which is very helpful when we go in to try to later pull comps and know what the true purchase price on that was. But I'm just warning you that if you are looking at two offers on your listing and one is building closing costs in and one is not, even if the one that's not building in closing costs maybe is offering you $500 or $1,000 less than the other one, your seller may want to look hard at taking the offer that is not including closing costs, because you have a lower risk of that appraisal coming in too low. Just something to think about. Anybody have any questions about that or had any of those experiences?
Just hold my breath on the one that we just ratified.
Yes. Would you like to explain that situation, Jennifer?
It's basically a full price offer. They put their $5,000 in closing costs on top of it, but I'll be honest, I was stretching that list price already for the house, because there was not the kitchen had not been updated on it. So yeah, we'll see how that goes.
I hope you don't get my appraiser that I just got.
I listened to that conversation yesterday. So did your appraisal come in with repairs at that amount? Is that what you said?
Yes. Oh, yes. It was.
So then they won't even be able to purchase it at their purchase price then.
Oh, I'm sorry. So they purchased it for $250,000. Our purchase price is $250,000.
I see. So then they'll be.
However, they need an appraisal for. They're taking a loan out for $315,000.
I understand.
Need an appraisal at $315,000. And the buyer's agent and I were saying, I went in pretty defeated in my conversation with the appraiser yesterday, because maybe I could get him up, talk to him about the area, talk to him about the amenities in the home, and get him up $5,000 or $10,000. But I am not getting him from $270,000 to $315,000. That's just absurd to think that I would be able to make that kind of movement. And I have occasionally had appraisals come in $3,000 low or $5,000 low. And in one case, I pulled the comps again that morning before calling the appraiser. And luckily, one directly across the street from my listing had just closed the day before and recorded. And I was able to say, hey, fresh new comp, take a look at this one. And we were able to bump up the appraised value enough to get the loan in. So if you ever get a low appraisal, please call the office, please talk to me, and we'll brainstorm. But in my case, I'm never going to span that gap between $270,000 and $315,000, because what the appraiser was saying is, even with those updates and renovations, it's only worth $270,000, because he's saying, how are you going to take off an old deck and put on a new deck, and I'm supposed to find you $10,000 more? Maybe I see that, maybe I don't. I'll tell you this, the buyer's agent and I both said, if all those things were done, I guarantee I could put it on the market for $325,000 and sell it for $325,000. because the things that are wrong with the house would then be, you know, the things that people don't want. The old kitchen would be gone, and a brand new expanded beautiful kitchen would be in there. So I have no doubt I could sell it for $325 if all of that was done. The buyers aren't nervous about the indication from the appraiser that it wouldn't be worth more than $270. They're not concerned about that, and neither is their buyer's agent. It's just frustrating that we can't get this renovation loan package through. So their options are, we can petition to have another appraisal, and the buyers would have to pay for another appraisal, and we would hope that appraiser would see things differently. Or they can pivot into another type of loan product, or close and then do a renovation loan later. And we hope they stay in the contract. You know, we'll see. They certainly don't have to. Obviously, the buyers have a termination right now, but they still love the house, and it's in an area where remodeled homes in that area really increase in value every year. So here's hoping they stay in. We'll see.
I'm going to chime in one more time.
Please.
A friend of mine is an appraiser, and we kind of were talking about it last night over my deal. And she's like, you know, really on these closed sales, all they have to go by is the data on the MLS and the photos on the MLS. Mm-hmm. And there have been several agents in town that when that house closes, they pull their pictures off. That is not helping the appraisers. Mm-mm. So that's something to think about too. Some of these doctored and fancied up pictures that they're looking at may not be true, what am I trying to say?
Representation
of the houses, but definitely leave your pictures up, because that's what they have to use to base your house on their house.
I never thought about that.
They can't see the ones that have closed.
That's
all
right.
They have is what we leave out there for them to see. Mm-hmm. So she brought that up last night, and I thought that was a good point.
That is a good point. I never thought about that. Absolutely. Well, it also helps us, doesn't it? When we go to list a house in the neighborhood and we want to, you know, look at what comparables in that neighborhood are. It helps us look and see how many of those homes in that neighborhood have been updated, have had updated kitchens put in, or not.
I did have a good chuckle. She said, and I'm sorry, realtors, but when you don't put a picture of a bathroom or a kitchen, I know it's not remodeled.
Yep. Sometimes it's that the bathroom's too small and I can't get a good angle in there, but yeah. Okay, next thing I want to chat about is just, unless anybody has any questions about that. Anybody have questions about appraisals and the seller's market and why that is dangerous to appraisals right now? In closing about this topic, this is an area of growth right now, okay? This is where every time a house sells for more than you think it's going to sell for and the appraisal comes in fine and it closes, that becomes the new comp. So that becomes the new comparative. So this is where we're going to see growing pains, where neighborhoods are going to go up in value during this time because buyers are willing to pay it. So fair market value obviously is very subjective, because that buyer definitely thinks it's worth it. Now, part of that is the pain point for the buyer of not having to keep looking at houses, keep losing in multiple offer situations. So sometimes they're willing to throw an extra $5,000 at something just because they are so tired of looking and they are emotionally exhausted and they just want a house. Jennifer had an interesting observation yesterday about how many more rentals are on our MLS right now. And she and I were talking a little bit yesterday about why that may be. And has anybody noticed or looked at the rentals on the MLS to see how many more we have right now? I don't know if it's become a trend for people to just go ahead and start putting them on there. I don't know if people with sellers with listings that have not sold and have maybe become stigmatized on the MLS have just said, never mind, we're just going to rent it and we'll try again in the spring. I don't know what the situation is, but it's something she noticed yesterday and we both found a little bit odd. So, okay. One more little data set I was looking at yesterday that I'm excited to share with you guys is every year I have to renew our errors and omissions insurance, and I have to go through and do all of our how many sales we had, how many agents we have, how many are full-time, how many are part-time. And it was exciting to see that we're up 24 agents from last year. So we're excited that that means we've got more Wainwright agents, and we have definitely been busier in the office. We had about 70 more transactions in the last 12 months than we had the 12 months before. Yeah, I think that was entirely Walter. So we had right at about 700 transactions a year ago, and we had about, what did I say last night? 700, I took it away, about 770 transactions this last 12 months. So that is pretty exciting. We're very, very happy. Okay, so the next thing I want to talk about is just open forum. I want to see if anybody has any questions. Anybody have anything new that they're noticing? Anybody have anything that they're having difficulty with? I have seen a huge uptick in questions about buyers wanting to back out of contracts. So that always happens in this type of market. People are buying houses very, very quickly. They're looking at it one time for maybe 45 minutes, and then they're making an offer, and then 2 weeks later, their adrenaline has settled down and they're having the home inspection and they're realizing that maybe this was not as beautiful of a house as they thought it was. And they're feeling like they were maybe rushed. So has anybody experienced that? We've definitely seen an uptick in releases. I think Walter's had a couple of occasions where the buyers have had a little buyer's remorse, and I have as well. So in fact, I even had one set of clients decide they're just not even moving here. So they've decided to stay in Indiana. So anybody have any experiences with that? Anybody trying to get out of contracts lately? Yes, Walter. Let me unmute you, Walter. Okay. Nope. There we go.
I'm on the listing side of one, and we had put it on the market on a Friday morning. I listed it at 7:30 on a Friday morning. By 2 p.m., we had an above list offer, conventional, very clean. People relocating from Richmond, got all the way through removal of contingency. Appraisal's been completed, and 2 days ago, they called and said, we are not coming to closing, and offered my clients roughly $4,000 to get out of the contract. And so where we stand now is the buyers have lawyered up, my clients have lawyered up, and we're going to see what happens. This is my first lawsuit. So 14 years in, and got my first lawsuit on a listing. I've gotten close a few times, been able to talk. The last one was my buyer, and I was able to talk them off the fence, and then ended up listing the house for them for free, got it sold, and then they bought another house from me. So it worked out pretty well for me. But I do not, I mean, these people basically, what the attorneys are telling us, not have an out left because everything's been satisfied. I mean, they sent us the removal of contingency last Friday. We signed it. Tuesday, they won out of the contract. So, I mean, I don't know how you get cold feet that quickly, even after having and the home inspection did not reveal anything traumatic. It was a bunch of minor stuff. And in reality, it didn't even add up to the $1,000 remediation limit. I mean, it was a little bit of furnace work and about $600 of general contracting work. So, you know.
Now, Walter, who has offered $4,000? The buyers have offered $4,000?
Yeah. So the buyers basically offered my clients the earnest money deposit, which was $2,000, and then offered to pay 1 month of their mortgage for them. And my clients, you know, without putting every last bit of their information out there, my clients are not interested in that.
Sure.
You know, they are moving on.
That assumes it'll sell again very quickly as well. Now that
exactly.
Now that it's got
I mean,
30 days on the market.
yeah, I don't think we'd have a problem getting it under contract again. The buyer's agent has even kind of been, and Ashley and I have had this conversation, has been extremely frank with me and said, look, we're on your side. We have told these people over and over again that they just need to close and we will relist the house for them and get it sold. But they are adamant about it. So we're going to see what happens. I'm waiting for the attorney to advise on whether we relist the house immediately or wait until the closing date comes and goes and then put it back on the market. So hopefully going to hear about that today. But, you know, again, as I said, 14 years in, this is my first lawsuit. It's, you know, it's always a learning experience in this business.
And this market lends itself to buyer remorse because you're just road weary by the time you actually win a bid, because you've done 3 or 4 offers in multiple offer situations. And when you finally do win one, you don't, I mean, you feel happy you got a house, but you feel rushed. You feel like you weren't given enough time to have do your due diligence, walking through the house, maybe bringing your parents to look at it. You do not end up crossing that finish line with a warm, fuzzy feeling about the house. So that's a rough place to begin from. And then you start looking into home inspections and radon inspections, and you already feel like you overpaid, you know, because you had to pay at or above listing price. So it's just a recipe for buyers to feel wary of what they've paid for the house. So I'm not surprised it's happening as often as it's happening. And, you know, when Walter called me and first told me about it, my recommendations were, okay, well, hold their feet to the fire and just demand that they close. Perhaps do that through an attorney. And Walter said, yeah, maybe if they fire off their own letter from an attorney, these folks will get over their, you know, their cold feet and close. And then I also recommended to him that earnest money is not the only money on the table. Okay. If they are in default and breach a contract and they have no reason, no termination right, then the seller can say, you know what, here's our price, and we will release you. So that could be anything. And the buyer can either do that and be released from the contract, or it can move on with attorneys. So there are several options.
I will tell you this, in what you were just talking about, in that same vein, you know, they did come back to us and say, well, what would it take? Mm-hmm. And I told them, I said, look, my client said it's going to have to be 5 figures to let this go. You know, I mean, the even funnier part of this whole thing is not only was their initial offer $5,000 over list price, they had an escalation clause in there to go up to $20,000 over list price. Yeah. Well, you know, I counseled my clients that when we received this offer within basically less than 12 hours of listing the home, I said, y'all might as well take this. This is about as good as it's going to get. Mm-hmm. It's a conventional loan with 20% down. They're already over list price. You know, we can work with these people. It should not be an issue. I know the buyer's agent. It's one of the larger teams in town. I know the head of the team personally. You know, so all of that stuff. And now it kind of just has come back to bite us. But you can't, it's hard to foresee these things, mm-hmm. you know, as you're in the midst of a transaction. And as the agent, of course, we want to make sure our seller's getting the best deal possible as well.
Yes, and that seller, when it goes back on the market, is going to have to contend with the property possibly being stigmatized by coming back on the market. You're going to have to explain why it has come back on the market. Otherwise, you know, other buyers agents are going to make all sorts of assumptions about why it is back on the market. Perhaps because of some sort of defect in the home discovered during a home inspection. You can't really say, you can't lie. You can't say, you know, back on market due to buyers financing. That wasn't the case. You certainly don't want to say buyers got cold feet, because then that makes it seem it's about the house when it's not about the house. So, you know, there's some discomfort for the seller there as well when they put it back on the market and have to explain why. All right, guys, if anybody have any other questions about that? If not, we're going to wrap it up today. We've got new agent training at 10. And you guys just let me know if you have anything you want to add. Otherwise, we're going to wrap it up today. Thank you all for being here. I appreciate it. Okay.
Thank you, Ashley.
You're welcome. Thank you guys.